important topics. So today we'll be talking about unerupted or absent upper incisors. We'll talk about both central incisors and lateral incisors. The reasons for both of them being missing in the mouth are different. So we will talk about all of them so that in the exam, when you're faced with central incisor missing or you're faced with lateral incisor missing, you know what to choose and what is the correct answer for each and the management as well. Then we will also talk about palatally impacted canines and missing canines per se. We'll talk about various situations. Then the management will be also covered, the investigation, so information gathering cluster also will be covered, the diagnosis and management planning and treatment evaluation. So particularly all the clusters related to the orthodontics will be covered in the three-part series that will be covered. So I also wanted to briefly tell you what all topics will be covered so that you know that how we are covering all the aspects of ortho in these three-part lecture series. Thank you, Hoda. I wish I had that energy every day. I there was a batch like few years ago when I used to do classes 5 days a week, and I don't know how I survived that batch. Maybe one or two batches I did that, but that was all I could do. 5 lectures every week. As you know, I like give 100% of my, you know, energy to all my classes. So, oh God, I was definitely 6 years younger. Still, I think it took the best of me. Yeah, so it was the hardest batch having classes 5 days a week. So, yeah, coming back to what we are doing today is unerupted and absent upper incisors, which include both centrals and laterals. Then the second part of today's lecture would be missing canines as well. I will be giving you all the reasons, all the most important common reasons, and so that in exam when you're given multiple confusing options, you know how to sequence it. Okay, so most importantly, you will learn the different reasons, etiologies, and diagnosis, and the sequencing of the same as well, so that in exam if one option is missing, how will you choose the next best option, things like that. All right. And then the second part of this series, we'll cover important topics like increased overjet, which would be like your class 2 div 1 situations. Then increased overbites, so deep bite situations, how to manage them, early interception, and then early management. Then the anterior open bite because of various habits, etc., the appliances, etc., that will go with that. So in the next part, we'll cover about the increased overjet, increased overbite, and anterior open bite. The third part of the series would be your lateral incisor crowding. So when there is a skeletal and arch length and tooth size discrepancies. And then another important topic of cross bites, and then the tooth movement and related problems. So in your fixed appliance therapy and removable appliance therapy, what are your problems with tooth movement, bodily movements, and tipping movements, etc. So these are the topics that will be covered in the entire ortho series, and in my opinion and in my recommendation, that would completely summarize entirely how ADC ever touches orthodontics in the ADC exam. I'm sure you have seen the questions with me in UF2 as well, and we noticed that ADC is actually, stretching the limits where it is asking the ortho questions more in depth now, right? Although you're not like specialist, but still you're expected to know what are the treatment modalities being used in certain situations, right? So as a general dentist, you may not be treating the overjet, you may not be treating the overbite or open bite or cross bites, but you must know the treatment modalities, the diagnosis, the investigation, the timely interception. Does that make sense for everyone? Why it's important and how ADC is touching it from the general dentistry perspective. Number one thing, I want all of you to acknowledge this, that you understand how ortho is being tested in ADC, right? How they are stretching the limits of ortho, how they are expecting you to investigate and diagnose and know the causes and etiologies, and then ultimately know the treatment and management planning, and then make the timely referrals. Does that make sense for everyone? Give me a big yes if everyone's aligned with the intention, aligned with the purpose of this series. This is going to be a game changing lecture series for you for the examination, because once you've attempted, once you have watched this 3-part series, once you've covered all these topics that I just mentioned, and you have mastered these concepts in the examination, I can confidently tell you that you will not feel that there is any particular ortho concept or a question that you are not abreast with. Okay, so that will definitely give you a lot of confidence, which you absolutely require to crack this examination. So in today we are covering these two topics, and as I said, in the upcoming classes also, you will be completely covering all the ADC ever asks you in ortho. So yeah, that keeps us in a very good position actually. That puts us in a very confident spot for the examination. I can promise you, when you go to the examination after doing these lectures, you would absolutely be having accurate answers for all the ortho questions. That makes me super excited, and I'm happy to be able to help you gain that mastery in ortho. One question on you asked is that, do I recommend making notes with these lectures? As you know, I never recommend doing that in any of my lectures. And as always, the hot notes are being prepared for these topics as well. So there will be hot notes. And for these two lectures, well, for these two topics which I'm covering in today's lecture, actually the hot notes are ready. After the class, I will be uploading them on the app, and then later you can review and revise them. They will also be added to the study plan so that you are going to have even a plan when to revise them. Okay, yes, slightly just having your journal open and writing down to reinforce certain concepts is absolutely recommended. So go ahead and do that. Um, Snigdha, I think 90 minutes is all I will take from now. Okay. So without much ado, I think we all are ready, and I see a very good a very good attendance today. I did not know you were anticipating ortho even more than prosto. So yeah, I'm excited to see the number of participants as well. That also motivates me and inspires me to give you a very rocking class. So I hope I can deliver on your expectations. Do let me know how you feel about it once we complete today's session. All right, looks like everyone's excited. Everyone's, yes, thank you so much, Aisha. So, can I please request everyone to be in the sponges mode, be in the receptive mode, become the sponges, become your SpongeBobs. Thank you, Essie, for mentioning that. So, can everyone become a SpongeBob, please? Right? Because I want, so, because I want absolutely complete attention, complete receptive mode, I want to provide you as much information. We can keep the questions towards the end, right? Or you can message me on WhatsApp and ask your questions later. So, all set. Thank you, LJ, for that cute sticker. Yes, please everyone be in this flowing, receptive SpongeBob modes. And yeah, we shall start now. So we are talking about the missing or absent or unerupted. There are various terms which can be used in exam, and they can be absent entirely like agenesis, or they could be unerupted. Upper central as well as lateral incisors. I will be talking about all three: central, incisor, and canine. All three situations I will be covering in today's class. So absence of your maxillary central or lateral incisors in your anterior dentition, in your dental arch, right, at the expected age of eruption is a very common presentation that in your clinical practice, lot of your young children will present with this in your clinics as a general dentist in Australia, because there is a referral method, referral mode, and that is why to you as a general dentist, you will receive a lot of patients with missing maxillary centrals or lateral incisors at the expected age of eruption. Now, these teeth are extremely crucial for aesthetics as well as their smile symmetry, the speech development, incising function development, then normal occlusion development as well. And that is why when they become absent, they have significant functional and psychosocial consequences. That is why a lot of parents will show a lot of concern, and that is why ADC will give you a lot of SBQs on these missing anterior teeth. So, a clinically missing incisor, right, does not mean that the tooth is not present or that it is completely absent or not developed. It can be present in the jaws but unerupted. So, it could be like delayed eruption or impaction, or it could be truly absent, like a congenital agenesis where it did not even develop. So the similar clinical presentations, right, can have different underlying causes as well. We must know all the causes, which can be local cause, developmental cause, traumatic cause, or pathological factors as well, which can be responsible for the similar clinical presentations. That is why the management cannot be decided based on the clinical appearance, right? So you cannot see the patient and there is a lateral incisor which is missing or a central which is missing and can decide your treatment plan or management alone on your clinical appearance. You will require to take investigations like OPGs, like occlusal x-rays, your IOPAs. Even your IOPAs will be done in your parallax so that you know the location of the tooth is lingual or buccal, right? And once you have identified the underlying cause, then only the management will be planned. Now, the primary objective why you identify the underlying cause is because treatment will vary according to the diagnosis. Sometimes it could be agenesis, it could be completely absent. In that case, you have to do the replacement or substitution of the adjacent teeth. Whereas if it is impacted, right, or whereas there is an impaction or dilaceration, or it could be your supernumerary tooth which is hindering the path of eruption, so your management would be different as per that. So your successful management will require systematic clinical and radiographic assessment, and then the individual treatment plan will be developed and created, which you will consider the aesthetics, the function, age of the patient, and long-term prognosis as well. So, what are the possible causes of missing upper incisor teeth? Now, that is a very common question which is again asked in the exam. So, first of all, the information gathering cluster will ask you what view of X-ray you will take. Then, after you have taken an X-ray, they will ask you for diagnosis, whether it's agenesis, whether it's mesiodense, whether it's your dilaceration, that you will identify on the X-ray. So, after information gathering cluster, diagnosis and management planning question will come. Then treatment and evaluation. Okay, once you have assessed whether it's completely missing tooth, absent, or it's like impacted tooth, then how you will decide the treatment plan and do the management planning. And then if the patient's parents are anxious, then professionalism and behavior management, and then health promotion, all those questions together will give you this like a SBQ together in ADC. Does that make sense how it comes in the examination? Like there could be some anxious parent involved, so professionalism would be there. So, and everybody understood the information gathering and diagnosis and the treatment and evaluation cluster, right? Pertaining to this topic. So, I also wanted to like give you some perspective on how this topic gets asked in examination and how the clusters will be covered in these topics. So I hope that helps as well. So you know that whether it's agenesis or it's an impacted, it will look like a missing front tooth. So missing, the commonest cause of missing central and lateral is absolutely different. Can you please memorize that? Number one thing. The common causes of missing maxillary central and lateral is absolutely different. So based on the examination presentation, your answer will be different. So understanding these differences is essential to plan the treatment for missing central as well as missing incisor, lateral incisor. So correct diagnosis and correct treatment planning would come once you know the common causes of centrals, how it is different with your lateral incisors. So central incisor causes are different and lateral incisor causes are different. I will be covering both of them. So most common causes for missing maxillary central incisor, number one is delayed eruption. It is not agenesis. So congenital absence is extremely rare for central incisor. Whereas if you go to the lateral incisor, the congenital absence becomes the most common, right? And then lack of space and ectopic eruption or trauma, they are less common causes. So developmental defects are common in lateral incisor, whereas delayed eruption and supernumerary tooth, dilaceration and ectopic eruption and impaction are common for the central incisors. Please give me a big yes if this is the major difference that makes sense to you. So for lateral, it's the developmental defects and syndrome-based defects. Congenital absence, palatally impacted lateral incisor, peg-shaped incisors, delayed eruption, and then retained primary lateral. But most important is the developmental congenital absence. And then less common is ectopic eruption, crowding, trauma, previous extractions, ankylosis, other supernumerary teeth, cysts or tumors, which are preventing the failure of eruption, right? Or syndrome. So, number one reason in exam, if they ask you what is the most common cause of lateral going missing, then the answer is congenital absence. And for the central incisor, whereas it would be delayed eruption due to most common cause is your supernumerary mesiodense obstructing and leading to delayed eruption, right? Does that make sense? This is the number one cause here. So dilacerations, delayed eruptions, impactions, and then less common causes in your upper central incisor is the congenital abscess. That's rarely seen in that. Or crowding, or ankylosis, or cyst tumors, or avulsion, extraction, failure of eruption. All these are less commoner causes. So this table is clear, and number one distinction between the cause of missing centrals and missing lateral is clear for everyone, right? So whenever you see a retained primary lateral incisor in your adolescent patients, it should immediately and always raise suspicion of congenital absence of permanent lateral until proven otherwise. It is such a commonly congenitally missing tooth, such a common occurrence that you should actually suspect it to be congenitally absent until proven otherwise. Does that make sense for everyone? Whenever you see in your adolescent patient and he comes to you, canines are erupted and everything, and lateral is not there, your first suspicion should be congenital absence rather than a delayed eruption. And only unless proved otherwise, you will go with the other causes. Otherwise, congenital abscess should be considered. Whereas congenital abscess of a maxillary central is rare, and if a central incisor is clinically missing, first suspect an unerupted tooth, that okay, it is an impacted tooth, it is not erupted, it's a delayed eruption rather than agenesis. And out of unerupted tooth causes in central incisors, supernumerary is the most common. Does that make sense for everyone here? So supernumerary for central incisor, congenital agenesis for lateral incisor. That's your two very common exam questions, and that's your accurate answer right there. Now these series are going to be extremely beneficial for the crash course candidates as well, because all these topics I have also covered in our 1,000 classes of ortho. Those who have done like full course with us know that in our 1,000 of ortho, all these basics are covered. But our crash course candidates do not have 1,000 classes. So these Prosto series classes and these Ortho series classes are definitely going to give you that advantage of all the basics and throughout the subject covered. Okay, so crash course candidates should absolutely pay complete attention. These concepts have been covered in thousands as well, but here I'm just reviewing them again. All right, let's talk about a case here and learn about how to apply information gathering, diagnosis, and management planning, and then the treatment evaluation clusters. So, a 9-year-old boy, Neil, presented to you with his mother, who's very concerned with unerupted 1-1. She also mentions that 1-2 is erupting over 5-2, and she dislikes the appearance. Now, the case upon presentation was shown in the image below. So, can you please, number one, have you been attempting the clinical detective pictures that I share on Facebook group every week? Now, those are not some random fun exercise. That is a very important and a very crucial practice that I put you through every week. That's a very well thought of and very intentional resource that I have been sharing with you on Facebook group once every week. And it looks fun, but it's a very disciplined and sincere practice of learning to identify the findings on the clinical pictures or X-ray, because that is how you start visualizing and identifying the findings. So your information gathering cluster and then planning the management plan and coming to a diagnosis and knowing what treatment would be required. So that practice will change the way you see and perceive pictures in examination, your confidence. So more and more you're practicing every week, either on your WhatsApp groups on daily questions or from the study plan or on the Facebook group through these clinical detective practices. Everything is strengthening you towards that confidence that you require in exams, so nothing will throw you off. So can you look at this picture, and if you have been practicing those clinical detective cases as well, it should now give you a confidence that yes, I can look at a picture and immediately the findings start showing up. Right? So can you appreciate the fact that 1-2 is erupting, but there is 5-2 underneath it? 5-1 is also there. Can you appreciate that? And 1-2, 2-1 is also erupted. Right? So now the clinical significance is that this presentation suggests an abnormal eruption pattern of maxillary anterior teeth. It is 9 years of age, so maxillary central incisors should normally have erupted at this age. That means that it is a delayed eruption of 1-1, and particularly when the contralateral central is already present. You all agree with that? And definitely it warrants your further investigation. Now, the primary objective is not to assume the diagnosis, but to identify the underlying cause of the delayed eruption of 1-1 and the ectopic eruption of 1-2. So 1-2 is coming ectopically. So because our 5-2 is still retained and our 1-1 has not erupted. It's a delayed eruption. So the ectopic eruption of 1-2, which has come over a retained 5-2, it suggests that it's an abnormal eruption pattern and it can indicate an underlying local obstruction or disturbance in an eruption pathway. Does that make sense? Can you derive from that that there was an abnormal eruption pathway for the lateral incisor? Now, first step is you will take a complete detailed comprehensive history in your information gathering cluster. First thing would be to obtain comprehensive history. It will give you valuable clues to underlying cause and will guide your clinical examination and investigations. So in your history, you will ask the parent about duration of the missing incisor, right? And that is your parent's primary concern as well. What is the history of complaint? You will determine whether the eruption has been delayed, whether there was any change, or whether any previous dental treatment was carried out. Then, most importantly, ask about any previous trauma history. You will inquire specifically about trauma to both your primary as well as your permanent incisors, right? Particularly if intrusion has happened during early childhood in primary teeth, can that affect and lead to dilaceration or an altered eruption of permanent successor? Do you all agree with that? If there is a trauma history and you will ask about trauma to both permanent and primary incisors, whether it was erupted and it got avulsed, or if it was not, whether primary tooth got any injury, and especially intrusion in primary teeth can affect the developing permanent successor tooth bud, which can lead to dilaceration, which can lead to altered eruption pathway as well. Then you will also ask about medical history because there are certain conditions and syndromes which also lead to delayed eruption. Do you all agree with that as well? There are certain syndromes which lead to delayed tooth eruption, right? So then family history, you will ask about delayed eruption or congenitally missing teeth or other developmental dental anomalies in close relatives, right? Anyone can tell other than Down syndrome another important syndrome which leads to delayed eruption of permanent teeth? Ectodermal dysplasia, absolutely correct, Simran. So, ectodermal dysplasia is another where you have retained primary teeth, right? And your multiple impacted permanent teeth. Cranial dysplasia as well. Absolutely correct, right? So, you will definitely ask about medical history and family history. Now, upon taking history, what you found was that Neil lost his 6-1, right, at about 6 years of age. So 2-1 is erupted. So 6-1 was lost at about 6 years of age, and 2-1 erupted normally at 6.5 years. Neil had sustained trauma at school as he fell over about 4 months ago, which led to the fractured 2-1 as well, with exposure of the pulp. It was a complicated fracture which was subsequently extirpated, and root canal of 2-1 had been done as well, right? So for this tooth, this was built up. And can you appreciate slightly the composite restoration here? So there was a complicated fracture. He fell 4 months ago and it was subsequently extirpated, right? So on examination, his teeth which are present in mixed dentition are is 6, E, D, C, and then lateral is erupted, but B is also retained and A is retained. And then 1 and 2 are erupted here, but primary C, D, E are present and first molars are also erupted. On the lower left as well, it is 1, 2, and 6, and C and E are present, and here lower central and lateral are erupted, lower first molar is erupted in canine, and the primary molars are there, right? So now you notice that there is also change in the midline here, that there is a center line shifted to the right and lower center line is shifted to the left. Let's all also look here. So midline is shifted here towards the right and lower is not visible here, but lower was also shifted towards the left. So there's a midline shift. So what is the reason for your center lines which are displaced is the imbalance of the upper anterior tooth size. Agreed with that? So retained 5-1 is smaller than your 1-1, which has promoted your upper center line shift and is aggravated by upper arch crowding. Now, what are the possible causes of your unerupted 1-1 in this case? So it can be congenital absence, which is highly unlikely. Do we all agree with that? Number one is highly unlikely. Avulsion and extraction of 1-1 is excluded as there is no history of the same, right? Then ectopic position of tooth germ can be possible, but is likely to be secondary to some pathological cause or presence of your supernumerary tooth. So our likely cause is ectopic position, but because of some other pathology or supernumerary tooth. Then another possible cause can be dilaceration or displacement, then supernumerary tooth. It is most likely cause of unerupted 1-1. Do we know? Like by statistics, this is our number one cause. But let's see whether for this patient it is the possible cause or not. Then comes our crowding. It is unlikely because only very severe crowding would prevent 1-1 eruption, which is not seen here. And then another cause is pathology, which is also unlikely as there is no evidence of alveolar expansions in the pre-maxilla to indicate that there could be any cyst or any tumor. So investigation would be required to confirm what is the possible underlying cause and diagnosis. You will take a clinical investigation where you will palpate the labial and palatal mucosa for bulges. Everybody knows that. You do first the clinical palpation of your labial as well as palatal mucosa. It should be palpated to see if there is any bulges present. Then the radiographic examination will be done, which would be to see whether there is present or absence of 1-1 or any possible supernumerary tooth. So the radiographic views that you will take is OPG. It will give you a general screening for developing dentition, right? It will allow you to tell that whether the unerupted tooth is present or not, but it will not tell you the slob and the lingual and the buccal position, right? That you will get with your vertical parallax, whether the tooth is present in is buccal or whether it is present lingually. So slob rule or parallax or tube shift method, absolutely correct. So when you shift the tube, if the tooth moves on the same side, then the tooth is present where? It is present palatally, right? Or lingually. And when, if you shift the tube and the tooth moves on the opposite side, then it is present buccally. So vertical parallax comes handy in those situations, right? So in examination, suppose in examination they give you, which will give you maximum information, and they give you the option of OPG, occlusal and periapical with parallax views. Which will become your best answer if all three are given? Which will give you the most information? Sometimes you may require all of them, but the most information will come with periapical with tube shift or parallax technique, right? So two IOPA views. Clear? That will become your maximum information revealing investigation. So clear for everyone? The information gathering cluster question, what investigations? The clinical and radiographic. OPG would reveal what, and parallax would reveal what, right? Now then comes our diagnosis and treatment planning questions. So on your Neil's X-ray, you could find here, if I zoom it, the X-rays are not so clear, but on the OPG especially not, but when you look at the IOPA here. So now do you see it was immature, right? Complicated fracture filled with calcium hydroxide, right? That is the management which was being done. Probably it is not completed yet. They're probably waiting for the calcific barrier formation, right? Now here, can you appreciate the tooth bud is present, the central incisor is present, but do you see another crypt here? On top of it, do you see another crypt of your supernumerary? Can you all appreciate that? That central incisor is present. The root is more than two-third formed. So it is impacted, right? It is impacted. It is not in an abnormal position. There is no dilaceration. Can you appreciate that? There is no dilaceration. There is no bending. But there is another crypt here which is present, which is hindering the eruption of your central incisor. It is your mesiodense supernumerary consuelo. This is your supernumerary developing tooth bud here. Can you see another crypt? There is another follicle. So central incisor has another PDL lining, right? And there is another overshadow of another crypt here. Can you all appreciate that? I want you to be completely able to appreciate. And these are your retained central and laterals here. And that is your ectopically erupted lateral here. Can you please appreciate all these findings on radiograph? So can you make a diagnosis now? No, Jazz, it's not hard to. Your eyes will only see what your mind knows. You know that every tooth has a crypt and a follicle, Jazz. If you lack information and concepts, only then you will not able to find things on X-ray. Alishba, do we know every tooth has its own developing follicle? Yes or no? And central incisor, do you see this PDL and its own follicular or its own crypt, right? But can you all appreciate this is a separate shadow? Can you see this radio opaque line over central incisor? In the normal central incisor situation, would you have another follicle overlying your central incisor? right? Shashi, would you have another follicle? This is your lateral incisor. The root is not visible here because this is an occlusal view. So this is only crown is visible here. But this is your retained central and retained lateral. Okay? Can you all please see that? Retained central primary, retained lateral primary, and then impacted central is visible here. But there is also another shadow of this circular follicle. Can you see that? Over that central, this shadow should be present or no? Is it a normal finding here? Anyone remembers radio series? I told you categorically, unless you know how a normal X-ray looks like, you will never be able to appreciate a pathological X-ray. Did I not tell you that in radio series? Anyone remembers radio series? That was the number one thing when I told you in the first class why we are doing normal anatomy. Why we are doing normal anatomical features of radio. We did all of that, right? In all kinds of X-rays, right? So that is why this is an abnormal finding. This shadow is not supposed to be there. This radio density, okay, is an abnormal finding. Clear for everyone? So now, once you have seen your radiograph, you have made a diagnosis. So please write down what is the diagnosis. It's a presence of a supernumerary tooth, right? Now, in this case, you will first create an opening space for unerupted 1-1, right? Removal of supernumerary tooth will be done surgically by referring to the specialist. Yes. So, management will include creating the space for your central to erupt. So, because there is a midline shift as well. So, you will have to create this space. Yes or no? There is a midline shift. 1-1 has encroached, 2-1 has encroached the space. So you will correct the center line correction, the midline correction would be required, supernumerary tooth surgical extraction would be required, and then the movement of the unerupted central will be done depending on the case, whether you will use a fixed orthodontics or the surgical removal, depending upon the case, which will be decided by the orthodontist. So surgical extraction and repositioning is also done. Then there is orthodontic traction that is also done. So various methods are available which will be decided by your orthodontist, right? But surgical extraction of mesiodents will be done before orthodontic correction of your central incisor. Clear for everyone or no? Is it crystal clear or not? But you must know, see, even as an orthodontist, you are not going to do all those treatments. But as a general dentist in ADC exam will ask you what will be the management planning for your patient. That you must now be capable to answer. That yes, there is a midline shift that will be required to be corrected, space to be created for the central, mesiodents will be extracted surgically, and then this central will be brought down orthodontically, close technique or surgical removal technique. Both methods work, whether it's impacted canine or impacted central, orthodontic traction as well as surgical correction. Both are done. Okay. So both will be done. Before your bringing your central into the eruption, the midline correction has to be done, Magni, because if there is no space, you cannot bring it down to its position. So you have to recreate the space by slightly correcting the. So fixed appliance therapy would be required. Now let's talk about another case here. So which is a possible situation. Case 2 is a 12-year-old Sarah presented to you with spacing of her upper anterior teeth. Upon presentation, this was the appearance of teeth. Can you all see the presentation? Centrals are erupted, there are gaps and canines are there. There is no lateral incisors. So at the age of 12, there is an upper labial segment spacing because of the missing lateral incisors. The diagnosis is clear. There is missing lateral incisor. That is our provisional diagnosis. So we will keep them at the age of 12 as congenitally absent. That is our first suspicion. So in exam, even without x-ray, if exam asks you what is the most likely diagnosis, it's impacted versus congenitally absent, which should be your first suspicion provisional diagnosis. In the cases of lateral incisor, beautiful, it would be congenital absence of the laterals. Wonderful. All the concepts coming together, and you're seeing how to apply it to the cases also. Tell me, yes or no, please. How the concepts that you're learning, and how in examination before giving your x-rays also they can ask you about the most likely diagnosis. When you know the concepts well, you know what to answer. Beautiful. So, what are the possible causes of upper labial segment spacing? It could be absent of laterals, or it could be failure or delayed eruption of your laterals. But our most common cause would be absence or congenital missing lateral incisors. There could be hypodontia, right? And also associated with cleft lip, cleft palate, Down syndrome, ectodermal dysplasia. Then it could have been avulsed or extracted, less likely, but hypodontia, yes, a congenital agenesis is more likely a cause. Then another cause could be it is also delayed eruption or impaction due to crowding, ectopic position, supernumerary, scar tissue, dilaceration, cyst and tumor, which is less likely in case of your lateral incisor. Do you all agree with that? Does it reiterate the concept? Does it strengthen the concept? Does it reinforce your concepts? Beautiful. Now, you will do a thorough clinical and radiographic examination to make your final diagnosis. Do we all agree with that? That we need to be making a clinical and radiographic examination. So the most likely cause in Sarah's case is congenital absence of 1-2 and 2-2, as your congenital absence of upper lateral incisors is more common in females. And the chances are higher if Sarah also has some family history of that. So you'll also take family history. Definite diagnosis will be established when you take your correct complete history and radiographic examination and investigation, right? Now, for spacing that you would do in Sarah's case, what would be the treatment option? So, in her situation, it was congenitally missing, right? So, what can be the treatment option in case where there is congenital lateral incisor missing? First treatment plan could be accepting the space, leaving it as is, right? But this is not a realistic option, especially if the patient comes to you with the chief complaint of aesthetics and gaps. Do you all agree with that? Accepting the space would not be a correct treatment option or a realistic option if your patient is concerned by the gaps and wants an aesthetic correction. Another possible treatment plan could be build up of your mesiodistal width of centrals and mesiodistal width of canine, right? And following is your considered like for the build up, right? You can use composite, you can use veneering with porcelain, you can also use orthodontic space closure using your fixed appliance therapy. That can be another possible option as well. And space closure, after that space closure, another possible treatment choice can be opening up the space for replacement of the tooth. That also makes sense or not? So you put canine distally and open the space for implants, or your cantilevered, not just implants hoda, but in the growing age you can use a cantilevered bridge, right? Minimally retained cantilevered bridge, using which resin bonded, absolutely correct Nitya, aesthetically better and minimally invasive in the growing age up till the patient reaches the skeletal maturity. Cantilevered resin retained bridge using central incisor. Beautiful, Madni. That was my next question. Which abutment would you use if you were to give and replace the lateral incisor by creating the space orthodontically, and you're going to give minimally prepared cantilevered bridge using the abutment on 1-1. Compared to your canine as well as your central has a broader surface area. The forces acting on the central incisors are least effective compared to the canines, right? So canines are more complicated forces. Canine guided occlusion is there, and your winged retainer also goes palatally. That would require you to modify your canine guided occlusion. Do we want all those complexities when we planning such treatment? Do we want to modify your canine palatal guidance surface? Absolutely not. That is why, and the forces acting. Where are more complex forces acting? On centrals or on canines? Absolutely on canines, right? So these are the possible treatment options available, and that is how you can manage. So all these are what you will offer to the patient, either by closure of the space or build up of mesodistal width and closing the space with composites or veneers, or by opening up with your orthodontic treatment and creating the space for the lateral incisors. Final treatment should be selected based on your patient's preferences. Is that clear and absolutely clear for everyone? That is how you will address such cases in exam, and you'll feel more confident as you see such questions and missing laterals and missing centrals cases in your ADC examination. Now let's talk about a missing canine, another very important. Anyone remember Zara from UF1? Anyone remember Zara, who had a retained primary canine and then she had an ectopic permanent canine eruption? But in one of the variations of her, there was no eruption and there was impacted canine as well. So you have seen regularly in your ADC exam missing canine or ectopically erupting canines, right? So we are going to be talking about unerupted maxillary canine now. Failure of eruption of a maxillary canine is one of the most common orthodontic problems which is encountered during adolescence. Now, since the maxillary canine has longest and most complicated eruption pathway, it is particularly susceptible to eruption disturbances, right? Can you please focus on this point again? I'm going to repeat this. Since your maxillary canine has the longest and most complicated eruption pathway amongst any tooth in the mouth, it is particularly susceptible to eruption disturbances. Concept understood or not? Right? So, because it is the longest path of eruption, most complicated path of eruption, and that is why the most susceptible to eruption disturbances. Now, the permanent canine is second most commonly impacted tooth. Your permanent maxillary canine is the second most commonly impacted tooth after third molars. Can you also memorize this concept? It is an exam question, direct. And it occurs in approximately 2% of population, right? Yeah, it's 2 to 3%. It's a range. Around 85%, 80 to 85%, if you're very fixated with the numbers, let me give you the range. So it's 80 to 85% is palatally impacted, whereas your 15 to 20% is buccally displaced. Are these numbers also clear? These are exact examination questions, always asked. The numbers are asked for the palatally impacted canines, so must know. Okay. Now, maxillary canine is often referred to as the cornerstone of your dental arch. We all agree with that? It is your canine guided occlusion, canine guidance, all the torsional forces, most important laterotrusive forces are being taken here. It is important in aesthetics, lip support, canine guided occlusion, arch stability, functional mastication, and that is why failure of eruption of canine has both functional as well as aesthetic consequences. Do we agree with that? So, a clinically missing canine should never be assumed to be congenitally absent. Just like your central, your canine also should not be assumed to be congenitally absent. Only lateral incisor is assumed to be congenitally absent. Are we clear on that concept, everybody? The tooth may simply be unerupted, ectopically positioned, or impacted. Therefore, every clinically absent canine will require careful clinical and radiographic investigation before a diagnosis is given. Primary objective is you have to identify why this canine failed to erupt, because your management can differ considerably depending upon the underlying cause, age of the patient, stage of root development, and even the position of impacted tooth, right? It can require your complex surgical management, complex orthodontic treatments, right? Deeper impactions can require complex surgical and orthodontic treatments. Do you all agree with that as well? Open or closed traction, absolutely, right? Or surgical repositioning as well, that can also require. So, what are the causes of a clinically missing maxillary canine? So, usually there can be very rarely congenital absence. It is not your assumed cause, number one cause. It is very rarest cause. It is extremely uncommon. Only 0.3% chances are there for it to be a congenitally absent permanent tooth, right? And you will only make this diagnosis once it's confirmed after radiographic examination that the tooth is not present, right? Now, another important cause is, which is the most common cause, is ectopic eruption. The commonest cause of a palatally impacted canine is ectopic eruption. Do you all agree with that? Commonest cause of palatally impacted canine is abnormal eruption pathway instead of erupting normally into the dental arch. So it took an abnormal ectopic eruption pathway. This concept is clear for everyone. This is an examination concept. So most important reason for a palatally impacted canine is an ectopic eruption pathway. So when it started erupting, it took an abnormal eruption pathway. See, third molars have a very straight eruption pathway. Do you all agree with that? Your third molars, it is very straight eruption pathway, but your canine develops very high in your maxilla, very high in your maxilla, and it travels a very long distance before erupting. So canine has a very long eruption pathway. Any disturbance that will happen in this eruption pathway can cause the canine to become displaced and eventually impacted. So, what factors can lead to this loss of eruption pathway, right? So, the eruption pathway is lost because of loss of guidance of a lateral incisor. For example, can you please focus and be the sponges and receptive here with the concepts? You can search out this one. This have covered in the 1,000 classes also, the sequence of impacted and missing teeth. Can we all bring our attention to the what is the reason for the ectopic eruption of canine? Do I have your full attention here, please? So number one reason is there is a loss of guidance from the lateral incisor. Very important concept that usually your canine uses the root surface of your lateral incisor as a guide during eruption. So what happens is your canine, which is erupting in the bone, uses the side of your lateral incisor root as a guide during its eruption. So if your lateral incisor is absent or peg shaped or small or has a short root, this eruption guide gets lost. And as a result of that, canine can deviate from its normal eruption pathway and can become displaced palatally. So number one reason understood, loss of guidance of lateral incisor root. Another cause can be genetic. So, there is an evidence that palatal canine displacement has an important genetic or familial basis as well, right? And it can develop with other developmental dental anomalies, right? Which share a common genetic origin. So, conditions which can commonly be associated with your palatally impacted canines are your missing laterals, peg shaped laterals, small lateral incisors, tooth size discrepancies, class 2 div 2 malocclusion. And these anomalies are considered for higher suspicion of an ectopically erupting canine. Another cause is delayed eruption, right? And but that you have to rule out with your x-rays if there is any pathology, any cyst, or any other tumor which is present and delaying its eruption. Another reason for impaction can be your arch length discrepancy, which is crowding, right? Crowding is commonly thought to be a cause of impacted canines, but it is not true for palatally impacted canines. It can be considered if crowding was present, canine is most likely to be ectopically erupt buccally. Is that clear for everyone? When there is a space discrepancy, right? Then in those cases, it doesn't cause it, it doesn't contribute Hijaz, it is linked with it. It is a condition commonly associated with impacted canines, does not cause it. It is not an etiology, it's an association. So, your arch length discrepancy will not give you palatal displacement, it will give you buccal displacement. Is that clear for everyone? Crowding will not give you palatal impaction, it will give you buccal eruption, right? Palatal displacement will be commonly seen in uncrowded arch, mostly associated with developmental disturbances of lateral incisors rather than crowding. Is that statement crystal clear for everyone? Palatal displacement is more commonly seen in uncrowded arch and is associated with developmental disturbances of lateral incisor rather than the crowding. Another cause is trauma. Trauma to a primary canine or an anterior maxilla can also change the position and interfere with the eruption pathway of the canine. It is not a very common cause, right? There has to be an appropriate history. Now let's look at a case presentation here, which is your Diane, a 15-year-old girl, presented to your clinic with her mother because her upper left primary canine 6'3" was still present, while the permanent canine had not erupted. Her mother was concerned that the baby tooth had remained in its place for several years and wanted to know whether it was normal or any other treatment was required. This was the case on presentation. So, do you see the primary canine here, which is your 6'3", sits still present? So, permanent canine is not erupted. This is the case on presentation, right? It was still present in the maxillary arch. The primary canine was still present in the maxillary arch. The remainder of permanent dentation had erupted normally, and which suggested that eruption of permanent canine had been delayed or disturbed rather than representing a generalized delay in your dental development, right? Now, by the age of 15 years, the maxillary canine should normally have erupted in the oral cavity, right? So, a retained primary canine should never be regarded as a diagnosis itself. Instead, it is your indicator of a failure of eruption. Yes, absolutely correct, Sarah. Both sides are primary canines. And do you also see there are the lateral is not your normal shaped, it's a small or peg shaped lateral? Can we also say that? These are, if not entirely peg, but smaller, definitely not peg. Like peg is completely pointy, but this is not entirely pointy, but still smaller shaped lateral incisor. Since your permanent maxillary canine is your second most commonly impacted tooth, what will be your most likely diagnosis before you took an radiograph? What would be your most likely diagnosis? Is it a congenitally missing one or is it an impacted permanent canine? Until proven otherwise, it will be an impacted canine. And early diagnosis would be important because that can lead to complications like external root resorption of adjacent incisors, cyst formation, loss of arch space, right? And then prolonged retention of your primary canine, far more complex orthodontic and surgical treatment requirement. So that is why timely management is important and diagnosis is important because it can lead to adjacent incisors resorption, cyst formation, loss of arch space, right? And complex ortho and surgical treatments requirement. That is clear for everyone or not? So once you take, the primary objective would be whether the canine is present or not. So take an X-ray to confirm whether it's present or not. If present, what is the exact position within the alveolar bone? Whether any damage to adjacent tooth has been caused or not. Whether interceptive treatment is still possible or you would require now a definitive surgical and orthodontic treatment. Right? Clear for everyone? So this is the most primary objective at this stage of the treatment. So what investigations would you take? Just like your central incisor case, where most likely it is impacted, you will do the clinical exam for the bulges and then the radiographic examination. Radiographic also you will take OPG, then maxillary occlusal, periapical with your parallax. Right? Clear for everyone? These are the radiographic methods, which will give you your, so OPG will help you in an overall assessment of tooth development, presence of pathology and presence of other missing teeth. So when you have to look at the overall developing dentition, OPG will come in handy. Yes. Then maxillary occlusal radiograph will provide you the detailed anterior maxillary anatomy and localization of impacted canine if present. Periapical radiographs is useful, which will help you determine root morphology, adjacent incisor roots, and root resorption. And the parallax method will help you in localization of the canine, whether it's with the Slob rule principle. That's an overexposure CBCT at this stage, right? So additional radiographic assessment may also be required when you require the root length, the root completion, and the mesiodistal position and the vertical position of the canine, right? It is not about sequencing, Preeti. It's about what investigation you want to prioritize. If you want to check adjacent roots, etc., as well as the lingual position or the buccal position, periapical radiographs with your slob technique, that is more helpful. If all three are given, it is not about sequencing, it's about question usually asked which will give you most information in exam. So that comes with your periapicals with slob rule, right? Because if you take only occlusal, it can tell you the buccal and the lingual position, but it will not tell you the position of the roots. It will not tell you the status of the root length. It will not tell you the adjacent incisors root status. Agreed? Occlusal view will be only information about buccal or palatal position. OPG can give you the broader assessment of your developing dentition, but again will not give you the complete lingual and the buccal positioning and the complete root status of the adjacent incisors. So that is why if you have to know the best amongst three, it is periapical radiograph, two periapical radiograph with parallax technique. Clear for everyone? So far, so good. All right, so let's talk about the management now. So management options include early interceptive management, Early diagnosis can improve the diagnosis. Ideal age for interceptive management is 10 to 13, which is before the eruptive age of canine, right? So early interceptive can be done in the age of 10 to 13. At the age of 15, interception will not work. Clear for everyone? So what is interceptive treatment? It can include extraction of a retained primary canine, because at that stage the root is still developing in the permanent tooth bud. Is that clear for everyone? From the age of 10 to 13 is when you can do the interceptive management. After the age of 13, when the root length is completely erupted, if it has lost its eruptive forces, you will require complete active orthodontic definitive treatment. So interceptive treatment at the younger age of 10 to 13 will include extraction of retained primary canine, which can encourage spontaneous correction of the permanent canine eruption path. It is usually successful when the patient's age is 10 to 13, displacement is mild, and the sufficient space exists. You will maintain the space. If there is crowding, you will eliminate the crowding and maintain the adequate space, which will improve the eruption potential. So that's your interceptive management. But that can be done before the normal eruptive early diagnosis, right? Before the ideal eruptive time. With your regular dental appointments, if you were taking baseline OPGs and you're finding them, then it can be done, right? So 10 to 13 power is the age of early interceptive treatment. After that age, refer to specialist when if you see that canine is severely displaced, root resorption is present, even after interceptive treatment of extraction of a primary canine and maintaining space, your canine is not erupting, then also you'll require specialist referral, right? Surgical exposure is required or orthodontic traction is required. In those cases, you would refer to the specialist. Clear for everyone or not? So definitive treatment, whether it's surgical repositioning or orthodontic closed or orthodontic open traction, it will depend on the patient's age, position of the canine, how severe is your impaction, what is the status of the root development, and is there any adjacent tooth damage, any existing resorption of the adjacent teeth that is going on. So that will decide that your whether your definitive treatment, what kind it would be, surgical or your orthodontic traction. Clear for everyone? And that would be it for today's lecture, for today's topic. I hope it made sense and I hope it gave you the clarity of management of centrals, laterals, and canine. Hoda, that was quick. That was an oh. Yeah, we didn't realize the time. It went by very soon. Right, that's what happens when the time is good. You don't realize how fast it flies. All right, so that would be it. And I will be posting an SBQ related and pertaining to this concept on our Facebook group. And you will be attempting that. I will be posting it tomorrow. And you can attempt that in the next class. No, no ons. CBCT is too much at this stage. Not an indicator. Right? And yeah, that would be it. So we will be meeting in the next class. We'll talk about the increased over jet, increased over bite, and open bite. Not really, because the Madni in this case, midline has been toward already shifted. So you'll not wait and you have to create the space for the central incisor. I think Aisha, we will be finishing it in the 3 parts. It should be done in 3 parts. So, all right, thank you so much, guys. If and anyone, we are already taking our March 27 intakes, and if you are looking for enrollment for the March 27 batch, we are already taking the dual course. We are already taking the March 27 indicates, and hot notes for this topic will also be added. Even if you want at this stage, you can join our crash course as well. Because even if in the crash course there are not a lot of classes, we have curated the crash course study plan in a concise manner so that the entire syllabus gets covered, but you don't have to like spend a lot of hours. And such important high intensity series will be provided and will be part of your crash course as well. So we are taking the intakes for both September 26 crash course as well as March 27 full course. Please join us. There is a lot that we do at Winspurt internally, and I'm sure you all are enjoying the confusion diffusion discussion every week on WhatsApp group. And then what else? Huda, that is covered here. What treatment you go through the class again, and you'll find that I have talked about the age groups as well. Okay. So now that depends, Nikita, what other options were given. Were they helpful or not? And depending upon whether the initial investigations have already been taken of an X-ray, some IOP has already been taken, and if it's completely deeply impacted in that case, and when you're planning surgery, right? So especially CBCT would be required when you're planning a complex surgical extraction. Yes, Nitya, that's the plan. So we are planning to give you confusion diffusion, all posters subject wise as a combined PDF. It would be released to you only few weeks before examination, so that in the end, towards the end, you can focus on the high yield concepts in a clear manner, and that is why that's the idea. So TG snapshots file will be provided in the last few weeks for revision, as well as confusion diffusion posters. All of them will be organized subject wise and then will be provided to you for revisions there. That goes with our confusion diffusion. What else is left? And I wanted to talk about, yes, now very important, like in few days our August public mock will also be coming. That's also just around the corner. Other than that, next week I'm planning a very special session. A lot of you requested me, you require a motivational session, something to cheer you up. You guys are feeling exhausted and kind of like, the energy and the spirits are draining out. So I received a lot of requests on WhatsApp, my personal WhatsApp, for some motivational class. So I'm planning to also take a very special class next week, which will include the motivation aspect. And yes, those who have just started their ADC journey, there's a lot of important resources that I share on my Facebook group, Facebook page, WhatsApp group, Telegram groups. My team has already shared the information there. Please join these pages and groups and follow us so you can keep getting the free resources. You can enroll in our free mentorship program as well, where you get monthly free mocks as well as weekly free classes. And please attempt the clinical detective pictures that I share on the Facebook group. They are so crucial. You will only know the importance of them when you go to exam and when you see the newer SBQs. And thank you so much, Nikita. But just probably I want to give you more than the voice. So I want to talk about some strategies. I want to talk about how to utilize. How many weeks are left? Actually, we are in week 15. So we are 7 weeks, right? Exactly, Aisha. So I could sense that you all are fatigued, you all are exhausted, and Ishmam, don't be scared at all. Next week we'll meet and we will have our very special motivational class. So I'm planning something because only last 7 weeks. Yeah, so 8 weeks including this week. By the time I meet you next week, it would be 7 weeks remaining. So it would be something how to utilize the last 7 weeks. And this week you have specialized prostomox beginning. So please, if you're joining and planning to join the crash course, this is the most appropriate time to join the crash course because we are bringing our 4 specialized prostomox, 3 specialized TG mocks, which are TG drug regime mocks entirely. So there are TG mocks anyways already. But on top of that, we are bringing very three special TG drug regime mocks, like 150 questions just on the TG drugs and emergencies, purely practicing drugs. So there are so many important mocks now from week 15 to week 22. Basically, in these 8 weeks, now you will get exposure to very, very complicated and special mocks, whether they are your health promotion, whether they're your infection control guideline mocks, or your trauma guideline mocks, or your pioneer mocks, which will include the latest ADA guidelines, ADA policies, and then TG drug regimes, four prosto specialized, and then TGSBQ mocks, and then not to forget the most important ninja mocks are also left. So for week 16 and week 20, two more ninja mocks to go. And last but not the least, Jazz, absolutely correct, our 2 day very special event of Grand Mock. So that's extremely valuable mocks coming from now this week 15 to week 22. So for the crash course candidates, if you're still anyone who's preparing for September 26 and if you're still thinking you haven't joined anything, please join this at least 8 week experience of the crash course because you will get the most mind blowing mock experience ever. Yes. So please, you can message me on WhatsApp and that is good, Snigdha. A little bit scared. If you're scared to do something, it indicates that you're doing something worth doing. A fear, like fear is not something that indicates that it's wrong, but rather it's an indicator that whatever you're doing is worth doing. If it's not scaring you, probably it's average. We don't do average. So I think if it's scaring you a bit, it's telling you that it's worth taking the risk. So some amount of fear is an indicator that you're stretching your limits, you're going outside your comfort zone, and you're doing something which is way valuable and worth taking all the risks. Right? Thank you so much, guys, and we will settle the anxiety, we'll settle the fatigue, I'll cheer you up the next week when we meet. We'll talk about some strategies, we'll talk about some methodologies which will set you up for the last 7 weeks. All right? So thank you so much. Have a great evening, you all. And I'm excited to see you now on Thursday as well as Friday. We have two UF2 classes this week and the following 3 weeks as well. So we have, yes, some extra classes going on. See you on Thursday as well as on Friday. This week I will be meeting you 2 more times. And then your TG revision classes, how are they coming along? I hope you all are enjoying that as well. So good thing is now the last 8 weeks are left and you would be every weekend revising the TG classes with the tutors. So I'm sure you're super excited with your TG revision classes as well. And that is an extremely important point at towards the end that you can get to do entire TG revision just before the examination, so it remains completely solid and you can memorize the concepts towards the exam. Thank you so much, everyone. Means a lot to me, and I'll see you Thursday. Bye. Thank you, Rice. Thank you. Bye, Madni. Thank you, Ramona. Bye bye. See you on Thursday. Yes, thank absolutely. Then Mozi, it's really helpful for the crash course candidates because they did not have my TG classes, but then they are getting the TG revision classes by the tutors. So it's a great, great addition to the crash course. Thank you so much, Dan Mozi. Bye, Ali. Bye, Supreet. Bye, Nitya. Thank you. Good night. Bye bye.